For parents who feel like the damage is already done, like there's no more hope left, what do you want them to know?
To let my kids make some decisions on their own. But if I make them for them, they're not going to learn how. If I
Right.
stand behind there and am the safe place to land, if they make mistakes, then they'll keep coming back.
We did do damage. I did do damage. The big question here is what now? What now do I do? What do I do next? What is the next right?
You don't always have to talk about it. You don't always have to talk about how shitty it was. You can talk about what you want it to look like now.
Mm.
I do not want anybody to be a doormat, even to your children. We get to say I screwed up. We get to say I want to make it better. How do I do that? Now let's build the new relationship that we want.
We are the absolute worst predictors of our futures. We have no idea what is going to happen. We have no idea what is even possible. And so, yes, the damage has been done. Yes, you're in a hard place right now, but you don't know what tomorrow is going to look like or what next year is going to look like or what 10 years from now is going to look like. You have no way of knowing.
You have the power of choice. And if inaction isn't working, then it's time for action. Sometimes doing nothing is the right thing to do, but continuing to do nothing with the same result means you got to do something different.
Welcome to No Alcohol Needed, the podcast. You are hanging out at the intersection of emotional wellness, personal growth, and living an alcohol-free life. Here we share everything we've learned and continue to learn about how to be happy, no alcohol needed. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the No Alcohol Needed, the podcast. We're so happy you're here. We're going to dig into the nitty gritty of parenting older kids and some of the stuff that comes up with that, because it's just something that I've heard come up several times in the communities that I'm involved in. I think it's an important topic. So we're going to get right into it. We've got Kristen, Sean, and Janice with us today talking about this. They've all been there with the older kids. They're also all in recovery themselves. So it should be kind of interesting. So yeah, we know like relationships in general are the hardest part of life. And then it's like the closer and the more important the relationship, the harder they feel, especially when things get messy. So we're going to talk about how to navigate relationships with our teenagers, with our adult children, and to not let guilt and fear run the show, because I think those tend to show up a lot when you're in our situation. So we're going to dive right into it. I'm just going to ask you guys. So we know a lot of parents carry guilt about the years that they were drinking. What did that look like for you? How did that show up for you after you stopped when you had older kids?
Take it away.
Go ahead, ladies. Please.
I was determined not to speak first tonight.
Me too.
But that's okay. So, I did not handle this well. I am probably the poster child for making a lot of mistakes. And when I kind of woke up and realized the damage that I had left behind me. And it took me a little while because, one, I compared myself to like the worst case scenarios. So I'm like, what I did wasn't that bad. And two, I was just plumb in denial. Like my kids didn't know how much I was drinking. So when I did wake up and I was in treatment around other 20 somethings, other kids my age, I was like, oh, and honestly, I turned this to shame and self-hatred. I did not manage it well, and it really fueled what became a bigger problem, which was to pull back from trying to reach out to my kids.
Mhm.
I was so afraid that they'd reject me that I kind of put a wall up, which to them looked like I was rejecting them again, abandoning them again. So I made a lot of mistakes in early recovery. Yeah. I got ate up by that guilt and shame.
Mhm. I know for me, when I think about that time, I hate the fact that my oldest got pretty much the worst version of me for like high school years. My
Mhm.
youngest, I got sober right when she went into high school, so she got like the best version of me, and I hate that, and it feels so unfair. And I wish with all my heart I could go back and change that. But I know when I first stopped drinking and my oldest was rightfully angry and hurt and all of the things, I liked to bury myself with the like, I deserve this because I'm
Mhm.
such a horrible mother, because I did all of these things. Like I
Mhm.
deserve to be treated this way. And I so it was like all the shame. And I would just like try to take it, and then I would hold on to whatever it was and like, bring it in even closer so I could just keep dumping shame on top of myself. So that's kind of the direction I went. I think probably, Janice, you said you didn't handle it well. I don't know that a whole lot of people in early sobriety like waltz through parenting and make it all
Right.
really beautiful. Like I don't think that happens.
Right.
Waltz through. I like that.
Yeah, there was no waltzing
Picture
in my
this
parenting.
wonderful dance and
Mm-mm.
waltz. No.
No,
Mm-mm.
no.
How many times did you trip?
Oh,
Did the music stop?
right.
Anyways, go ahead, Kristen.
So there's like a few things I'm thinking about, and I'm sort of trying to collect my thoughts on it. But one thing is nobody waltzes through parenting, right? Like that's something that I have to constantly remind myself of. Like this does not come with a rule book. Nobody knows what they're doing. And you could be the most sober parent in the world from day one and still not do it right. You know what I mean? Or do it the way you think is right. So my kids, there's 5 of them, and they ranged in age from 12 to 20 when I went into recovery. So I spanned like this whole range that we're talking about. And Julie, like you said, some of them took it worse than the others. I would say my second to youngest took it the worst. I have a ton of amount of guilt. I'm also the closest to her now. So like that's one piece of the guilt part that I was thinking about. I was lucky enough in early recovery. I actually went to 15 months of treatment. So I was surrounded by therapists, groups, peers, all of that for those few months. Like I was surrounded by guides, and I think that I don't give them enough credit often, because it was like every single move I made, somebody was asking me to reflect on that. And I can't even imagine how hard it would be if I didn't have that, especially with 5 of them. And I'm only saying this because I think that I want the audience, because when I speak about this, and it wasn't a breeze for me, but when I speak about it, I know that if people are comparing themselves to my situations, they're just going to think I had it so easy, and I did. Like I did have that support. I had an ex-husband. We had been divorced for a long time. The language around my drinking was very, very much, she's sick and we're here to support her to get well. Also, so interestingly, my second to youngest took the brunt of it, but all 3 of my oldest are adopted, and 2 of them were maternal sisters abandoned by their mother, all of these things. And they were the 2 that were the angriest. They were, even though they weren't the ones that I didn't hit my second to oldest, but I shook her by the shoulder. I did everything else. They've seen me drink vodka while I'm making pancakes in the morning. They've seen me pour vodka into a water bottle and put that water bottle in my car while I'm going to take them to horseback riding lessons. Like they've seen the things. And I have a lot of guilt about it. It comes in waves. It comes in waves. Like they will say something and I will just be like we'll see a picture. We saw a picture the other day, and one of them was like, I remember that day that we went on that walk, and I was just hoping that you would stay awake. Like I was just hoping that you would be sober that whole day. And that is guilt. You know what I mean? Like that's insane. And I continually am talking to therapists and supporters to sort of guide me through how to manage that. Cause like what you were saying, Julie, the reality of that guilt once it sets in, what it does for me is I'm like, I don't deserve them. I don't deserve recovery. I don't deserve, and I haven't had a drink over it yet, but I sure think that if I didn't have my support system, I would have a drink over it. You know what I mean? And I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of all of the stuff I was thinking about. So, not that I'm avoidant of the guilt, but I'm very solution oriented. And I made some notes about this when I was thinking like further along in the podcast, but I am very like that comes up and I'm like, I need to deal with this right now. This is not something I need to push aside. And right now, I'm not in sober living. I don't have 17 other women to hold me accountable and 10 therapists keeping me in 5 groups a day and three 12-step meetings. I don't have that right now. I have a job. I have, you know what I mean? So it's currently it's a very conscious thing. Anyway, I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of the thoughts that I had with it.
Right, it
Mhm.
absolutely answers the question, and I think, and Sean, I think we're going to hear from you too in a second, but I think it's really valuable to hear it from Janice and Kristen, and also from me. Like this is the self talk, right? For me, it was I deserve this. For Kristen, it was I don't deserve them, and we all have some version of those thoughts that come up, and they gain traction fast if we're not
Mhm.
careful. So yeah, Sean, what about you? What did that guilt show up for you like?
God, it's hard to feel that again because it was so painful. Kind of like what Kristen was saying. It took me several years to get sober a long time ago. And my 30-year-old now was 8, I think, or so when I got sober, and my 27-year-old was 3, and my 17-year-old was not even around yet. And I went away for a year. Like I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and I went up to Prescott for like 10 months, 11 months away from my boys. And they didn't really know I was an alcoholic because I was a nice, happy drunk. I played guitar. I acted like a total butthead. Their mother didn't like me by drinking because I didn't go to work and, I just spent money and played. So they were like, "Where's my buddy? Where's my best friend?" I just kind of vanished at the end. I finally vanished at the end. And I felt the most guilty about that, about abandoning them.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And um and I realized that feeling when I got away from treatment, that shame was going to get me to drink again.
Mhm.
It was waiting there. Every time I started, ruminating about how I'd let them down and what a terrible person I was and all the shitty things that I did, that was getting me closer to the next drink.
Yep.
So I had to recognize that that was the poison that was going to get me to relapse another time. And I had relapsed so many times I couldn't count. So I had to come to some acceptance that, yes, I was that person. And yes, I'm capable of being that person again. Like that motherfucker is inside me today, 20 plus years later. All he needs is a little bit of vodka and he's coming out. And that scares the hell out of me and it humbles me. So now I recognize I have to acknowledge and accept, and it's a good reminder. But at the time, it was the worst pain on the planet to know that
Mhm.
I'd hurt the most important people in my life.
Hmm.
My
Yeah,
17-year-old's never seen me drunk, I'm just so grateful for that.
it's a blessing. And I just want to tag on that and say that's why our recovery community is so important.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Because you can't fall back on your kid or your partner anymore
Mhm.
because they're like, you've been selfish for half of your life. We don't need to hear about your grief and shame over
Right.
us not liking you. So that's why you really need your recovery community. And I relied upon that heavily too. And
Yeah.
Some of the times the best place you can share that pain, because generally speaking, there's somebody else who's going through something similar
Mhm.
in that space, in the recovery community, because there's really so many of us. I'm going to shamelessly plug our Monday night meeting, because it's a fantastic opportunity to. I mean, my kids. I don't have the teenagers part of this, but I mean, I had two little girls, and when I got sober, they were 5 and 6. So I mean, I still thought about like what kind of damage did I do to them in those tiny years?
Mhm.
Like I know I didn't show up as the best version of myself. That's impossible when I was drinking as much as I was. And so like I still think about this today. That's the guilt and shame. I think even whether you have the teenagers or not, and in this case, trying to not feel like I my actions back in those days set them up for, failure later on in life is I mean, I can't predict that. I don't know what's going to happen, but it there's probably always going to be a piece of me that if they, don't turn out the way I want them to, that I'm going to take blame for that. If they have daddy issues or men issues, I'm probably going to take that one on myself and be like, oh, clearly that was because of me. You know what I mean? So, just to tack on to a little bit of that.
Well,
Yeah.
I want to jump on that too, because that's something I always talk to with when I'm doing parent groups is that, yeah, we carry that guilt and shame. And did we wound our kids? But look, by by living through this terrible situation, we're also demonstrating to them resilience and the ability to
Mhm.
come back, and that
Mhm.
it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to be human. And those lessons is well, I was about to say, as long as you keep living forward, as long as you keep trying, I think are way more powerful than the damage
Mhm.
that we did.
Mhm.
And that's really how I healed a lot of that guilt and
Yeah.
shame within me.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's also
I
worth
agree with that
talking about the
100%.
fact that other parents who don't have a drinking problem, parents who essentially show up the very best that they can, still have
Mhm.
kids that don't quote unquote turn out a certain way,
Right.
right? My parents raised me in essentially what was picture perfect. They did not drink to excess ever, whatever. And I still turned out the way I turned out. I still have my own issues. And so it's like because we had this problem with alcohol, we want to blame it on that and blame ourselves for that. Reality is we are raising humans who become adult humans and make their own decisions. And that is
Yep.
it, whether you drink or you don't drink or you made mistakes or, whatever. That's the reality of it. So keep that in mind to all of you parents that are listening, feeling like I screwed my kid up in so many ways. Like people who don't drink screw their kids up too. We all
Yeah.
do. That's part of parenting.
It's your
Um,
God-given right to screw your kid up a little bit.
I
I mean,
remember like
sorry, it is.
the guilt that I was feeling, and I did some pretty horrible things that I'm still like so ashamed of. And I'm not going to sit here and share them on the podcast because, family privacy is important to me. But I remember talking about it and remembering or feeling like I've caused so much trauma in my kids, and that is such a real pain when you stop drinking. Like it
Yeah.
hurts like to your core because they're the people we love the very most. And
Mhm.
a woman told me nobody makes it through childhood untraumatized. And that was such a comforting statement to hear because that meant I'm not the only one who did this. And I wish that I hadn't done it. We all wish we could change things, but also we're not the only ones who make mistakes. So I'm going to ask you guys, I'm going to skip around here. I know I send out questions to everyone, and usually I try to go in order, but I want to dig into this one a little bit and see what comes up for us. So a lot of sober parents feel like they almost have to tolerate bad behavior or bad treatment from their kids because it's almost like they owe them. Right. So
Mm.
let's talk about like the boundaries that come up there and just your perception in general of that.
I'm going to start on this one. Sorry, but parents that let their kids get away with everything are equally as abusive as parents that beat the hell out of their kids in their development. When I'm working with clients and I see that parents that don't, that clients that their parents let them do whatever they wanted to do, these people don't know how to interact with the world, right? There's no consequence. You have to have boundaries and you have to have consequences. But it was very hard for me to hold boundaries when I'd
Right.
known that I'd done all these other things and broke so many boundaries. But setting boundaries, being a person of your word, and holding your children accountable shows them that you care about.
Mhm.
And I didn't have boundaries when I was drinking. I remember this one time I bought a bean bag, and this bean bag had a billion beans inside of it. And I cut this thing open and threw it in the middle of the living room. And there were these styrofoam beads everywhere. And we had a blast. But I was showing that you could act like a moron and it's okay to act like that as an adult. And it's just not. So I really believe that setting appropriate boundaries, even though it's hard, is better for your children. We don't set boundaries because we don't want our kids to not like us. That's about us. It's not about them.
Mhm.
It's about us wanting
Mhm.
to be our kids' friends. And that's not our job.
Mhm.
So, Sean, I think you just finished off with it, but like the first thing that comes up for me when I hear you talk about, essentially like befriending your child, not having the boundaries. What are parents avoiding when when they're doing that?
Rejection.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. What are the parents avoiding?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're avoiding having to feel uncomfortable that they've made their child upset. Right? Parents avoid that because I don't want to feel uncomfortable. I don't want to set a
Right.
boundary with you because I don't want you to feel upset. Well, tough. Life is upsetting. You got to teach them how to have that.
Let me ask you this though. So let's talk about, if we've got older kids, say late teens, early 20s, and you want to set boundaries after you've fucked up over and over again. And so you go in and that kid is behaving in a way that's not acceptable in your home. Let's say like they're refusing to do any chores or help around the house, or they're speaking to you disrespectfully, or whatever that is. And it's not okay. So you set that boundary, but you're terrified that that kid is going to walk out that door and you're never going to see them again.
Yeah.
Like the consequences of setting that boundary, when I imagine what you're talking about, yes, it's avoiding discomfort, it's avoiding rejection, but there's also like very real, potentially long lasting and painful consequences. So, what are your thoughts there?
This is a tough one, and I have to say, I didn't experience them pushing my boundaries to the point of, like, either live in my house my way or not. So I probably would have let him walked out though. But the truth is, in early sobriety, I was completely estranged from my kids. I mean, I was really cut off. I lived that where they barely spoke to me, didn't return my text, only tolerated me. So I lived through that kind of rejection. So after that, when our relationship started to repair, and I totally mirror your opinions and your thoughts about boundaries. I think boundaries are really, they're guidelines, they're directions for like a roadmap on how to get where you want to be. And we all do better if we have a roadmap. So this is what I found that was helpful to me when I would find myself emotional and, you know, uh, okay, won't pick on a child tonight. But I have 4 kids too. You have different personalities, and
Right.
some of them are more people pleasing and some of them are more like, "No, I'm gonna stand up to you." And what I learned to do was, like, not take it, but put a pause on it and wait until both of us calm down to regulate my own feelings and to let them regulate their feelings because and I'm sure you guys all know this, that, like, when you're upset, you're defensive, you can't think straight. I mean, we're in our fight or flight mode, and so at sometimes it might look like I was putting up with bad behavior, but it was like I'm choosing the least, I don't want to say dangerous, but the least destructive, potential destructive route so that we can come back to it when we're all calm.
Yeah.
I just want to go back to whoever said, like, what are we afraid of? Like, what are we afraid of? And for me, 4 of my girls were in their teenage to early, like, and a teenage girl is just naturally a psychopath, myself included. I've talked about this on the podcast before. They're freaking crazy. I was crazy. They're kind of like in that, and my son was the same way, but he was also had 4 older sisters, so he didn't have a lot of space. My biggest fear was not that they were going to run out forever, because I did have the support of their father saying, she's sick, we're here to support her. My biggest fear was that they were going to talk to me about that they were going to say, well, you did this. And they were going to remind me about when I was drinking while I was driving them. And they were going to remind me about when I took one to a concert and had to have EMS take me out because their drinks weren't strong enough and I had a seizure. Like, I didn't wanna remember that. I wasn't in a place, and that was a very, very real fear for me. Um, and I think for a lot of us, like, it is you're right, Sean, it is selfish. Like, it's very selfish of us, but it's also, like, self-preservation and new territory. But to go back to what I said in the beginning, my friends who were not alcoholics, my friends who were not drug addicts, and also had teenage girls that threw their stuff at them, that
Mhm.
weaponized their own behavior. And I'm not by any, I love my daughters are incredible, and I'll definitely get to talking about our current relationship now. But there was fear for me around my voice with anyone, around boundaries with anyone. And I don't want to dilute the strength of the child parent relationship, but I was in no place to navigate relationships at all, right? So that's kind of like one thing that was pretty challenging for me. And again, where my recovery community, my support team, the therapist I was working with, my ex-husband, all kind of came together to help me with that. And I know everybody doesn't have that. Um, but I wanted to mention that because I do think that it is, when I got to the point where I realized that a boundary is just something that I tell people that's a way that I can love myself and love them at the same time. It's not a door shutting them
Yeah.
out, it's a door letting them in.
Yeah.
When I
Mhm.
got a real picture of what resentment became, and if I could be calm, Janice, if I could be as calm as sometimes I have to step away too, but if I can be calm, I can sort of explain it in that way. I also didn't have kids that pushed my boundaries that much, because there was 5 of them. I think they held each other accountable, and they had another parent that was holding them accountable in a separate house that was just kind of like, these were the rules. The other thing was, and this is something I hold guilt about, they were afraid I was gonna relapse. They were
Oof.
afraid they were gonna have to lie for me again, and they said that to me.
Mhm.
Like, they tiptoed around me so much in my first, like, 4 years of recovery, that, like, making amends with them was very challenging. There were times, and I've talked about this in a different episode, where they would really lay the truth on me, but those were times, the only, and I'm reflecting on this right now, so sorry if I'm not being super clear, but the only times they did that was when we were in family therapy sessions. When we were outside of that bubble, that safety bubble, they weren't doing that. They were tiptoeing. They wanted me to be sober. They wanted me to be alive. They knew I had died and been brought back to life in the hospital. So they didn't want to lose me, even the ones that had that took real issue with me. But yeah, boundaries are hard. And then the other thing I just wanted to say, because I'm like, collecting my thoughts from what everyone else has said, but like, the strength that a rupture and a repair brings to a relationship is impossible to measure. The safety that's brought into a parent-child relationship when any kind of repair comes around, even if it's that tiny thing where you set the boundary, they fight back, you hold your boundary, they figure it out, whatever it is, that repair makes the relationship stronger. And if you can do that once with a boundary, you can continue to do that with boundaries. And there becomes, teenagers aren't children, they're little adults. So they can learn just like a romantic partner, a platonic friend, our grown-up family members. And I don't mean to overestimate them, but I think they get underestimated a lot. They're powerful and they're smart. And I think also some of the stuff that, and I, by no means am I saying that I do say I'm grateful I'm an alcoholic, but I'm not grateful I was that kind of parent, right? But in a lot of ways, they gained strength from that. And they told me that. I didn't tell them that in some like weird, twisted way to make my alcoholism okay. They told me that. They told me they had to look at their own traumas sooner. They told me they had to grow up sooner. And that makes me really sad and really proud at the same time. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of feelings involved in all of this. And I almost just didn't want to do this episode because I was like, I don't love feelings anymore. I just don't love them.
We asked you specifically too.
Yeah. I mean, we
You backed me into a
handpicked
corner.
this episode.
Yeah.
You said something important there. We teach other people how to treat us. We teach our kids,
right.
we teach our teenagers, we teach our adult children, we teach our spouse and our friends and our parents. We teach other people how to treat us. We let them know what's okay and what's not with our actions, with our words. And I think that that's important. And what you're talking about, where, yeah, like our teenagers, they're young people, but we can set boundaries and they can learn what's okay and what's not okay in our relationships.
We want them to take that to their future relationships
Right.
too.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
It's not
Exactly.
just this relationship. We want them to carry that forward.
Yeah.
I want to say one thing on this. A boundary isn't about making sure somebody honors it. It's about you holding
Right.
it.
Right.
When I was in alcohol, I didn't have any boundaries. It was the hardest thing for me in the world to do. When I started setting boundaries and holding them, for me, that's when I got sober. So it has nothing to do with the other person. If I say, this is what I'm going to do, a boundary is my response to your behavior. That's it. You get to do whatever you want. This is my response to it. And then I have to do the response. And when I can do that, then I stay sober. Then I'm not able, you don't get to manipulate me.
And then you can stay sober and you can also respect yourself, which is huge
Absolutely.
when you've spent a lot of time not respecting yourself.
Absolutely.
So I do have this experience where I set a boundary, and it was a pretty simple boundary. It was like, I'm going to need you to treat me with some tiny modicum of respect. And I'm going to need you to at least take care of your own belongings that are in our home in a way that, isn't leaving me doing extra work. And that was the extent of it. So, I shared that as calmly and respectfully and kindly and lovingly as I could. It was, this is what I expect. And if not, then I'm going to need you to figure out where you're going to go. Because if you can't treat me with respect and I feel like I have to tiptoe around my own house at all times, that's not working for me. That's not working for my sober life. That's not the life that I want to be living. And so my kid packed up and left and still hasn't spoken to us, to me, to our whole family. And it's been years now. So I actually have lived that. And I don't even have a way to share with people, like, here's what you should do, or here's how you should feel.
Right.
It's the most painful thing I've ever experienced as a parent, as a human being, in everything that I've been through. And I've been through some shit that continues to be the hardest, most painful thing. And it's something that I carry every day, and I don't get a break from it. That doesn't go away. And so I know there's so many parents who are allowing that behavior that's making their life painful and miserable, and it's making it hard to stay sober, but it's also just making it hard to live because they're afraid of that happening. And I can't tell you if I'm glad that I set that boundary or if I'm not sure. But at that point it was like that felt like my two options. If you want to live in this home, then I need these two tiny little bits of respect. And that's it. I know I've screwed up and I know I've done some horrible things. And I know I don't deserve a whole lot of respect, but also it's been several months. I'm working to be the best version of me that I can. And I need like the tiniest bit of not hating my life in my own house. Right. Um, and it was hard and it was horrible. I will say that I can experience peace in my own home, and I wouldn't be experiencing peace in my own home had I not done that. So was it worth it? Probably, but it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. And I think a lot of times in our
Julie, may
lives
I
we
ask you a
have.
question?
Yeah, absolutely.
May I ask you a question on that?
Uh-huh.
Is it worse? Would it be worse to be living with her and resenting her daily?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That building resentment, and it
Yeah.
turns into like this anger that eats at you and it eats at the relationship, and it makes
Yes.
you literally not want to exist in your own life. So absolutely. Yeah, I mean for sure. When you put it that way, that's a great way to put it. Thank you. I
But
needed that.
but it's kind of like, hey, do you want to be stabbed in the arm or shot in the foot, right? Either
Yeah.
Right.
of them hurt. Which one
Mhm.
bleeds the most?
100%. That's exactly it. There's no easy answer. They're both painful.
No.
They're both going to suck.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Good way to put that.
I was thinking, oh, sorry, Julie. Were you
Go ahead.
still,
You're
were
good.
you, that is, first of all, that's incredibly moving and
Yeah.
hard what you went through. I want to say that, what you're going through. And you know what I have thought about, what I have thought about a lot since I saw this topic is the boundary that my parents had to set with me. That's the reason I ended up getting sober.
Mhm.
Because I was like, I'm not going to treatment. I'm gonna leave this hospital. I know everybody's been crying. I know I've died. And they found someone like one of us, right? Who got on the phone with him and was like, don't give her money. She can't go back in her place. She don't do this. Tell her no. Tell her it's treatment or the streets. And I remember my dad crying and I remember screaming at the guy on the other end of the phone who I had lunch with the other day, by the way. But and thanked him for saving my life.
Yeah.
And I actually didn't talk to my father for 6 months, and there's other complexities in that relationship. And I remember that, and I remember that strength, and I remember what he did for me in that moment. And I talk to people all day in crisis. I talk to parents all day in crisis who are like, their child's in their house, they're using, they've overdosed, the parent has to have Narcan, this is all going on, and the parent is saying, and this is like a much, right, bigger boundary thing than what I've ever had to do with my kid, and the parent is saying, "But if I set the boundary and tell them if they don't go to treatment, they have to move out, they're gonna go on the street and they might die," and I'm like, "They're gonna die, you're killing them. They're
Mhm.
gonna die in their bedroom. They're gonna die in your house because you didn't set this boundary. This is your chance." And like I said, I haven't had to set any boundaries that drastic with my children, but every time I do have to set a boundary and every time it's really hard, I'm like, they might be they might not talk to me, right? They may not talk to me again. And this is with not just my children, but with anybody. But is this really important? Is my, like you said, my peace really this important? Do I want to resent this person? And how many people have done this for me? Not to
Yeah.
me,
Mhm.
for me. How many people had to teach me? And let me tell you, it was not just that last boundary that was set with me. How many people had to teach me that what I was doing wasn't okay?
Mhm.
A lot. But it only took one to hold it. It only took one to hold that boundary. I mean, I had friends that went out of my life, but it only took one real one to hold that boundary. And yeah, I just think about that all the time. I think about how critical they are um, for for the people that set them for me and for my life. And I'm like, ultimately, it can't be a bad thing to set a boundary. If I zoom out and I'm like, is this really the healthiest thing? And when I think about what you said, Julie, yes, it is healthy for our children to pick up after themselves and talk to other people with respect, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But
And for
again, I
sure,
just,
like there were massive complexities in that relationship too. Like I don't want to simplify it just down to those things because certainly there was more behind it. That, and like you said, Kristen, I think any of us as parents, especially if we're parents who have a history of things we regret, there's a lot of complex things that go into any of
right.
these situations. But I also think it's important just to talk about the realities of it. Sean, I really
Yeah.
appreciate the way you changed that from, yes, this is like I've gotten my peace and I'm grateful for that. But that still feels so selfish. But when you switched that way of thinking to, do I want to spend the rest of my life with that building resentment toward my own child? Absolutely not. And that feels less selfish, I think, right?
Yeah,
So I appreciate the perspective.
your boundary protects them from
Them.
you,
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely.
right? My
Definitely.
boundary protects you from, because I can be that person too. So, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a great way
Yeah.
to look at it.
Yeah.
Love
It
that.
was really
I'm
helpful.
sorry you had to go through that. That is
Thank
hard.
you. I appreciate it. It's definitely the
Yeah.
hardest thing, but we're all going to go through really hard things. And I think that's something else I learned is we're all going to have to make decisions where there's no comfortable, easy, happy answer. And that's just life. That's not
Mhm.
just with parenting. That's in all of life. We're going
Yeah,
to face decisions where no answer feels like the good answer or the right answer. So,
absolutely.
so let's shift this conversation to a little bit of the positive, right? Like what's the potential here? If you have kids that are older, kids that are teens, that are adults that have been through some hard stuff with you, what does the potential look like? And if you have any thoughts or experience you want to share on how to make that potential come true, we would also really love to hear that.
I'll jump in on this because I feel really, really blessed to have the relationships I have with my kids. They went from about as bad as I could handle and as they could handle. And they're good. They're not perfect. We still struggle. I guess my message is I want to give hope to parents out there because I hear it all the time. I hear people go, "Oh, my daughter won't let me see my grandchildren." Or I'm 12 months sober now and they still won't talk to me. And I'm like, yeah, that happened to me too. I mean,
Mhm.
I've probably said this on here before. It was 4 years before my youngest son and I made any real progress. 4 years. And 2 of those years we lived in the same house, which was barely passing. But what it took, here's my recipe for parents that I always, and again, I'd love to hear what you guys all think about this. I talk about like 3 pillars of rebuilding a relationship, and it starts with creating a safe, consistent environment. Improving what it had, because that's going to look different from one family to another, because you can't repair a relationship if you don't feel safe with that person. Then to build some connection, and then to inspire hope. And the first thing that you do with that is to work your program. I used to say it was like stay sober, but now it's really work your program because recovery is so much more than just staying sober. And your kids, your family want more than that. And like with Kristen, I think my kids were a little afraid of confronting me too at times, and that's part of the process. Here's the bottom line. I just had an aha moment. When kids pull back from us, and maybe not in your case, Julie, we have to realize that, or when they say things or do things that are feel intentionally cruel, that the distance they're putting up is not always about punishment. Sometimes it's just about them protecting themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And when you honor those boundaries, that's beginning to put a little layer of safety.
Mm-hmm.
So, consistent behavior, showing up, and I'll always tell people to communicate about what their program is. I say this a lot on Instagram. I'm like, what is the one thing that your family really wants to know when you get sober? Well, they want to know your plan, right?
Yeah.
They want to know what the next step is.
What does that
So,
inner work look like and how is it impacting you? Be like
yeah.
open and honest about that.
And obviously, the key thing is because I asked my daughter about this today. We had lunch, and I'm like, what would you want people to know? And
I love that.
she said that it's going to take time. You know, and I like each kid had a little different timeline. The shortest was 1.5 years, but she's like, it's going to take time and things are going to pop up that hurt and you're going to have to address it. Don't back down from hearing the painful things. It's not fun at Christmas time. We were having a conversation just out of the blue. My child goes, yeah, it's kind of like your mom being gone for 2 years. And I went, oh, he's talking about me, you know, because I too I went to halfway a recovery house after a while and it was like, dang, but it was, you know, and it was a very calm situation. So we sat calmly and I'm like, thank you for that. Thank you for telling me that. And if you want to talk about it, we can do that, you know, but, and I think it was spontaneous. I don't think it was a built-in resentment. I think it was like, yeah, connect the dots, mom. You know.
Yeah.
So, what's worked for the rest of you guys?
I had consistency written down, which you mentioned, Janice. Consistency without pushing, which is a very fine line to draw. For my oldest, that was, and she was the longest that really took, because she remembered her first mom leaving and then she remembered me falling apart. I bought this pack of like Amazon single note cards with envelopes and I just wrote her note every day. One note, not like a grandma note, like, hey, here it's sunny, blah, 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 but just like, hey, I'm thinking about you. Not every day, every week. Just like, here, if you need me, you don't need to reach back out and, you know, kind of like clarifying, like there's no obligation on your part. I'm just letting you know I'm here. And whatever that time frame is, that if that's once a week or if that's once a month, but it was like consistency, the same day every week I wrote it, the same day every week I sent it out. And I should have asked her if that is one of the things that made the difference, but it also made a difference. And this is selfish, but for me, like I was also telling me I'm still trying. And I was telling her I'm going to be consistent. And consistency is the thing that I was not providing to anyone in my life until I got sober, myself included. That is the word that I wrote down when I was thinking about this part of the topic is like just consistency and patience, you know. And two things I am not naturally good at. Consistency, patience, being quiet, not my strong suit. You know? Like,
Valid.
and those are all required. And you're just like, oh, but it's, and I mean this in the least cheesy way possible. It's character building. So what I'm saying, it was very helpful for me in my recovery because not only was what I was saying to my child was, I'm consistent, I'm here for you, I'm patient, but I was saying it to myself. I was proving it to myself at the same time because I was doing the thing. I was doing the thing that I said I was going to do, right? So,
Yeah.
The hardest thing to do is to not take their hurt personally about you. So, like, their hurt is still their hurt, and you may have been a part of that hurt, but when they bring it up and then I make it personal, then I now negate their hurt because I'm hurt. And that safe space that you talked about disappears.
Mhm.
because now I'm too worried about protecting the hurt that I have that you just threw at me that I gave to you. It's just a battle that destroys connection.
Mhm.
And like, even without the teenagers have an incredible way of using words and twisting them and saying things and throwing the dig in a time of weakness, or is it like, I'm not emotionally resilient right now and you're throwing this one at me, I don't have the capacity for it, and it's really easy to react in a way that's defensive toward it. But the hardest part for me was to not take what's going on with them personally, and as soon as I could separate that, I could show up.
Mhm.
Exactly what Kristen was talking about is I could show up, I could be there. Even if it's a 6-year-old who's having a tantrum, I've taken the tantrum personally. You're not listening to me. You're not doing this thing. You're not. Wait a minute. The tantrum's not about me.
Mhm.
The tantrum is about them. What need am I not meeting? Where do I need to show up? How do I fit into this emotional thing? Now, if I learned over time that I could stay in that space while it was happening, I created trust.
That's huge right there.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I couldn't do that without not taking it personally. If I couldn't separate that, I was screwed. I was dead in the water.
Mhm.
It was a great way of pulling trust away. But as soon as I stopped that, that's where I created safe spaces, and that's where I started creating like emotional safety.
Mhm. The
I
thing that comes up
could,
the most
yeah.
for me when I think about like so my relationship with my youngest is obviously very different. I've talked about her quite a bit, and we have a phenomenal relationship. She just moved out. She's 18. She just flew the nest. But we have a brilliant relationship, and I'm so grateful for it. And if I look back at like the one thing that helped that relationship flourish, the word that comes to mind is fearlessness. Like I had to be fearless walking into conversations with her because they hurt. Because I knew that I wanted her to have the freedom to say what she needed to say. And I needed to not be terrified of the shame. And I needed to not run away from the shame. And I needed to be able to hear her, to give her the space to be heard. And that is hard. And maybe it's not fearlessness. It's absolutely scary. It's willingness to do the scary, painful thing, even though,
Mhm.
but that when you can show up in that way, when you can show up really vulnerable and really honest and in ways that are scary, and you can say things that you truly might be rejected for, that you might say something vulnerable and they might just turn around and say something really hurtful back, and you have to be willing to say it anyway. But with those things, connection is built. And Kristen, I think you talked about connection. That's where the connection happens. And it's the tiniest bits of connection that over time start to build up until they become something that's strong. If there's one thing I've learned about parenting in the 23 years that I've been a parent, it's that connection matters more than anything else. Connection matters more than their behavior. Connection matters more than their grades. It matters more than going on vacations or extracurriculars or anything else. The connection you have with your children is the most important thing you'll ever have with them. And I wish I had known that when my kids were little, but I at least learned it in time to fight for it with my youngest. And I'm grateful for that.
What did you have there, Sean?
You guys said everything that I was really thinking. You know, God, this is. Yeah, I've got adult children. I can't wait to be a grandpa. I'm waiting for this time. So the kids are a little older than I can even believe. But when I answer this question, I just own it, right? This was your fault. Yes, it was. And don't make excuses.
Yeah.
Don't negate their
Yeah.
perception, even if their perception is skewed. Own it. You're damn right I did that, and I don't ever want to be that person again. So, and I think you, Kristen and Janice, all of you were saying basically some version of that. My job as a parent is to teach my children that the world does not give a shit about them, and I do. My job is to teach them that life is hard and they can get through it. The superpower of being somebody like us that is in recovery is we have had the world kick us in the teeth, knock us out, almost kill us, and we've survived it, and we've learned to get up like a phoenix and rise out of the ashes and go straight forward into life and become the person that we want to be. That is the biggest superpower in the world. And if my children call me when their life is kicking them in the teeth and I'm the person that they call, then I've won.
Yeah.
I've won. Doesn't matter about the cars or the home or anything. That is my job as a parent. And so how do I do that? I'm honest. Like you said, I'm consistent. I show up. I screw up and I say I screwed up. I am not perfect. But when they feel that I'm a safe person that's not going to lecture them, that's going to say, yeah, you did that. Here's the consequence. What did you learn from it? They saw me learn from my mistakes. I help them learn from theirs. That is my job. My job isn't to be their friend, but it's also not to be this I told you so parent that most of us grew
Right.
up with.
Right.
Like, those days are over. Our kids know more about the world than we do. So how do I allow them to have a safe place where they can be validated and understood even when they screw up?
Yeah.
And if they can do that, then I've won. And that's the potential. The potential is your kids have a place that they feel safe always, no matter how old they are. That's
Yeah.
my job.
I love that. I think there's a lot of hope in this whole conversation as far as what can happen, what can be. And it's to get from, the point that we're talking about now, where these relationships and many of these relationships are really good and beautiful and fulfilling, to get to this point, there's a lot of a mess and a lot of pain and a lot of consistency and a lot of all of the hard, uncomfortable stuff first for literally years. Right? I mean, like Janice, you said, like 4 years before repair even started to happen. So people get so impatient and they're like, well, I've been sober for 6 months. I've been sober for a year. It might take longer. And I encourage everybody to be patient as you try to work through this and allow it to be messy for as long as it needs to be messy. Because the last thing we want to do is smooth over the surface and leave a bunch of mess underneath. I mean, that's what we've been done for years, and we're better than that now. So I'm going to close this out with our last kind of wrap up question here. For parents who feel like the damage is already done, like there's no more hope left, what do you want them to know?
Well, one of the things I want to point out is that, especially if it's a young adult or a teen, we got to remember that their brains are still developing. The prefrontal cortex, I always get a little scientific, which that part of our brain is the problem solving, the decision making, the rationalization. It is not in control yet. It's still developing. And the research, the scary part is the research is beginning to show that may be prolonged to the 30s because of our reliance upon technology. Scary, isn't it? So what I want to say is that give your kids time. It's going to take time for them to catch up until they can really think through things rationally and put the pieces together in a way that is not in that primitive brain, fight or flight. I've got to protect myself. Let's make again, like everyone said, make a safe place, a place for them to land. With teenagers in particular, it's hard. It was hard for me to let my kids make some decisions on their own. But if I make them for them, they're not going to learn how. If I
Right.
stand behind there and am the safe place to land, if they make mistakes, then they'll keep coming back.
Mhm.
And then as adults, by some freaking miracle, sometimes they call me and ask my advice for stuff. What do you think? I'm like, Jesus, I don't know anything about crypto, or whatever. So,
My daughter has lived on her own for exactly 2 years, and she has texted me at least once every day asking for cooking help or advice or something in the kitchen, and I'm thrilled. Like, that's the greatest gift
Yeah.
that I can ask for. I'll take
Yeah.
it.
mhm. Yeah.
What about you,
And then
Kristen?
look,
Oh,
wait, look for the little pieces. Look for
Yeah.
little glimmers of that we're making progress. Sorry.
well said.
So when I saw this, what do I want people who say the damage is already done? What I wrote down, which sounds really harsh because I am harsh, is the damage is done. Like we did do damage. I did do damage. The big question here is what now? What now do I do? What do I do next? What is the next right thing? And we can only kind of know that for ourselves and for our own relationships. But one thing that I did write down is, you kind of like start to rebuild these relationships and then everything seems okay. And then, like you said, Julie, it's like it's almost like then you want to sweep it under the rug. So if there is a little bit of an opening, what I tried to do, what I was advised to do, and what has worked really well for me is not sweep the damage under the rug. And I still do this, even though I'm years into fabulous relationships with all 5 of the kids. But once in a while, when the time is right, when I'm out to lunch or we're taking a walk or something is happening, I just acknowledge the damage. Like, I'm like, hey, I want to just like I want to let you know, and I don't do it in an attention seeking way or a oh poor me or no poor you way. I just say I just want to acknowledge that this damage is done, and I know that we both know that I'm doing everything I can, but if there's something new that comes up for you, I'm here for it. I'm here for the feedback. And like Janice was saying, they're changing. We're all changing. So that feedback may be different. My trauma from my childhood didn't really come up for me till I was almost 30. So like having that and understanding that is a big piece, and remembering that we're all ever changing, and we're as adults. I'm so different than I was even last year. And I do that with some of the adults in my life, but I prioritize that with the kids. And I think accepting that we did do damage and sort of falling on that sword, for lack of a better phrase, and saying this happened and it was wrong. I did this and somebody else said I think it was Sean. I did this and it was wrong.
Mhm.
Is powerful. It's
Mhm.
powerful.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
so yeah.
Sean.
I think the acceptance of where it is in this moment and being able to
Mhm.
accept where it is in this moment with that child. And each child, based on where they were in their development, when you were going through whatever you were going through, is going to have a different perception. It's going to affect them differently.
Mhm.
And so you might, like Julie, you're saying, you might be healed with one child and another child you're estranged from. And
Right.
the acceptance of that is where it is right now. And there's always a possibility and a hope for change. Because,
Mhm.
I haven't been in 12 step in a long time, but one thing I did learn was lack of acceptance is the reason that we all go back. And our number one goal, no matter what happens in our life, is to stay sober. That is the number one goal.
Mhm.
And so the acceptance of where I am in the moment is probably the most important thing I would say. Um, I would also say that, you don't always have to talk about it. You don't always have to talk about how shitty it was. You can talk about what you want it to look like now.
Yeah.
We
That's
don't,
good.
I do not want anybody to be a doormat, even to your children. We get to say I screwed up. We get to say I want to make it better. How do I do that? Now let's build the new relationship that we want. And when we focus on that, the trust rebuilds a lot quicker with consistency, doing what I say, saying what I'm going to do. But there's studies out there. When minor trust has been broken, it takes 3 to 6 months to heal. When moderate trust has been broken, it takes 1 to 2 years. But when trust, like we're all talking about, has been broken, it can take upwards of 7 to 8 years to
Yeah.
build that trust back. And that is, where that living amends comes in. If we just say, today I'm going to do better than I did yesterday, eventually it will heal, or we have to accept that the people in our lives just don't think we're safe for them. And that might not be ever. And that's hard to hear, but they just might not feel safe. And that is something that's their journey, that we can be here if they want to walk through that door. And if they don't, we can respect that through our acceptance.
Mm-hmm. So when we feel like the damage has been done, and it absolutely has been done, so often we go to worst case scenario, all of the worst possibilities. And we like to, as humans, play out that movie in all of its worst case scenario form until the end of eternity, because that's how so many of us operate. Reality is, we are the absolute worst predictors of our futures. We have no idea what is going to happen. We have no idea what is even possible. And so, yes, the damage has been done. Yes, you're in a hard place right now, but you don't know what tomorrow is going to look like, or what next year is going to look like, or what 10 years from now is going to look like. You have no way of knowing. All you know is that you can show up the best that you absolutely can, as often as you can, and continue moving in the direction that you want to move. The other thing that I want to remind everybody of that's listening is, you get the opportunity to model for your children everything that you want them to be capable of, and all of the skills that you want them to have and be able to utilize when they're adults, when they're in relationships. And that's an incredible opportunity.
You have the power of choice. And if inaction isn't working, then it's time for action. Sometimes doing nothing is the right thing to do, but continuing to do nothing with the same result means you got to do something different. I want to say thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Janice, for coming together for this special episode to have this conversation. We appreciate you guys so much. And we'll see you all again soon. To our audience, thank you for sticking around to the end of this. Hit subscribe, hit like, hit follow. All of the most wonderfulest things. And we'll see you again on the next episode.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.